SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්. SLT Mobitel Home Broadband සමගින් non-stop ගමනකට data බෝවන්.
දසනකාන්තී චූර්ණය සහිත ලීවර් ආයුෂ් දන්තාලේපය දත්වල ඇති ප්‍රශ්න 10ක් වළකයි.
Tonight, high security. President issues gazette declaring high security zones in Colombo district. Assistance. Japanese ambassador shows that Japan will back the nation in efforts to restructure about $30 billion of foreign debt. Creditor assurances. President Ranil Wickremesinghe reassures transparency and equal treatment for all creditors during the debt restructuring process. Non-aligned. Foreign Minister Ali Sabri says that the country's non-aligned policy enables it to withstand geopolitical pressure while getting international aid. All this and much more coming up tonight on First at 9, this Friday, the 23rd of September 2022.
Vim Deara milliliter CA Smart Pack එක රුපියල් 85ට දැන් වෙළඳ පොලේ.
From AdaDerana, this is AdaDerana First at 9. Live from Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to AdaDerana 24's English News. I'm Andrew Bernard. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe assures transparency and equal treatment for all creditors during the debt restructuring process. These remarks were made yesterday at the Ambassadors Forum, where the President and high-ranking government officials briefed 23 Colombo-based foreign dignitaries on the present economic situation and Sri Lanka's negotiations with the IMF. Meanwhile, the diplomats pledged their fullest support while also commending Sri Lanka's recently reached socio-economic stability.
The diplomats made these comments yesterday at the Ambassadors Forum on debt restructuring and the IMF program held at the President's office. Chaired by President Ranil Wickremesinghe, the forum was attended by Colombo-based envoys from 23 countries, both members and non-members of the Paris Club. During the forum, the foreign ambassadors expressed their confidence that Sri Lanka will be able to resolve the ongoing crisis. President Ranil Wickremesinghe emphasized that it was the government's expectation to overcome the economic challenges faced by Sri Lanka and assured that all possible measures will be taken towards resolving the crisis. Meanwhile, Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Nandalal Veerasinghe, and Secretary to the Ministry of Finance, Mahinda Siriwardana, elaborated on the present economic condition in the country and the progress of discussions with the International Monetary Fund. Speaking at the forum, President Wickremesinghe assured transparency and equal treatment to all creditor nations during the process of debt restructuring.
It's a challenge which all of us have to face to ensure a better future for the next generation. So as we discuss, more and more details will be available, and I can assure you that transparency and equal treatment will be maintained at all times. I'd like to conclude by thanking you.
Firstly, I would like to say that 2 months after the start of the new government, Japan appreciates that there is a certain stability in the socio-economic situation of Sri Lanka. However, we understand that Sri Lanka is in a very difficult economic situation, so we are continuing our humanitarian assistance, and we have just announced additional $3.5 million of humanitarian assistance. And we would like to support Sri Lanka with other friendly countries.
Your Excellency, Mr. President, dear colleagues and friends from Sri Lankan government, first of all, we are very grateful for this occasion to meet and to discuss and to understand what are the plans of the government. And we, as my Japanese colleague, France is welcoming this level agreement and the plan of the government in order to pursue and to continue this very difficult task to restructure the debt and to find very sound economic position for the country. Of course, France is expressing its full solidarity and support your country in this difficult time.
Now, Japanese ambassador to Colombo, Mizukoshi Hideaki, assures that Japan, being one of Sri Lanka's main creditors, will back the nation in efforts to restructure about $30 billion of foreign debt and find a way out of the crippling economic crisis. According to Reuters news agency, Ambassador Hideaki, during an interview, reiterated that Japan stands by Sri Lanka in support of the debt restructuring negotiation processes. In the context where reaching an agreement with creditors is key for Sri Lanka to secure the $2.9 billion bailout package from the International Monetary Fund, the Japanese ambassador to Colombo expressed Japan's support in restructuring Sri Lanka's foreign debt. Ambassador Mizukoshi Hideaki said that Japan stands by Sri Lanka in support of the debt restructuring negotiation process so that Sri Lanka can reach a final agreement with the IMF. According to government and IMF data, Japan holds around $3.5 billion of Sri Lanka's total bilateral debt of about $10 billion, amounting to 4.4% of the island's GDP. Japan is also a major trading partner of Sri Lanka. The ambassador further mentioned that Japan intends to play a constructive role with other creditor countries, including China and India. Although Japan will support the debt negotiation process, Ambassador Mizukoshi said that talks on large infrastructure projects will only be resumed after Sri Lanka's economy recovers. Expressing his views further, he said that those discussions can restart in the future when this economic crisis is over and the economic conditions are in good shape. According to the ambassador, investments to Sri Lanka have been hamstrung because of inconsistent economic policies and procedural obstacles, while expressing hope that those inconsistencies will be resolved in the future. Now, a discussion took place between Indian High Commissioner Gopal Bagle and Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena at the Temple Trees, where they discussed matters pertaining to economic cooperation between the two countries and joint projects. Prime Minister Gunawardena expressed his gratitude to India on behalf of extending debt restructuring facilities and providing relief material, food and medicine to Sri Lanka. The discussion focused on the possibility of more Indian investments in the energy sector, including solar and wind power. Moreover, they discussed about the joint projects on Trincomalee oil storage tanks, ports, railways and assistance for agricultural and fisheries development. The Indian High Commissioner in Colombo has also thanked the Sri Lankan Prime Minister for his guidance in various capacities for strengthening ties between India and Sri Lanka in all areas of development. Now, Foreign Minister Ali Sabri delivering a statement at the high-level meeting on the human rights of minorities at the 77th session of the UN General Assembly, emphasized that the Sri Lankan government remains committed to building a community where the rights of all the people are secure, their safety and security is ensured. The Foreign Minister went on to say that the Sri Lanka envisions an inclusive transformation towards sustainability, developed nations for all as a constitution, and the Sri Lankan legal system is based on the rights to equal recognition before the law.
Sri Lanka is a multi-ethnic, multicultural and multi-religious country. There are 3 main ethnic groups and 4 main religious traditions. Diversity, therefore, is an integral phenomenon of our national ethos, a way of life. In Sri Lanka, it is not uncommon to see places of worships of Buddhists, Hindus, Christians and Muslims in close proximity to each other, with a number of historical religious sites throughout the island being frequented by all communities and religious communities, and religious celebration of each community being shared by the others. Right to equal recognition before the law has formed the very foundation on which the legal system of Sri Lanka is based. The Fundamental Rights chapter of Sri Lanka's constitution guarantees that no discrimination of persons in Article 12(2), which state that no citizen shall be discriminated against on the grounds of race, religion, language, caste, sex, political opinion, place of birth, or any of such other grounds. The Constitution provides parity of status to the languages of the majority and the minorities. While Tamil is the linguistic minority in Sri Lanka, both Sinhala and Tamils have been recognized as national languages since 1988, and English as the link language. It has imposed a duty on the state to publish all laws and subordinate legislation in all 3 languages. Sinhala and Tamil are also identified as a language of administration throughout the country, and the Constitution recognizes the right of a person to be educated in their national language. The fact the legal system of Sri Lanka provided for a multiplicity of laws to accommodate and preserve the respective cultures and religious rights and traditions of communities. This feature of Sri Lanka's legal system is of particular significance in the context of protecting and upholding the rights of the communities. Mr. President, all communities participate fully in the life of nation, whether at the national, provincial or local level. Political representative of all communities is addressed by election regulations on nomination from parties being commensurate with the national population ratio. Ethnicity or religion is not a barrier to achieving high-ranking position in government, with the post of Chief Justice, Attorney General and Governor of the Central Bank and many other being held by those from the minority communities. Main cabinet portfolios of Justice, Foreign Affairs, Ports and Shipping, Fisheries and others also have been held by the people's representative from minority communities post-independence. Mr. President, the government has prioritized building trust and achieving reconciliation among communities. In keeping with Sri Lanka's social, cultural and historical norms, regular dialogue continued to take place at various levels to ensure inter-ethnic harmony and understanding among all communities. In this connection, the government maintains a zero-tolerance policy on the act of religious hatred or intolerance and has taken measures to combat the same. Mr. President, the government of Sri Lanka remains committed to build a society where the rights of all communities are secured and their safety and security is ensured. Human dignity is valued and equal treatment to every person, notwithstanding the religion, ethnicity or race, is an acceptance of public life. In going forward, Sri Lanka envisions an inclusive transformation towards a sustainably developed nation for all, where when strengthened the law enforcement and right protection is recognized as critical.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Ali Sabri, reaffirms that despite the pressure of geopolitics, Sri Lanka's foreign policy of non-alignment allows the country to remain sovereign and maintain healthy ties with the international community while avoiding being part of another nation's battles. During an interview with the TRT World, the Foreign Minister went on to say that the Sri Lankan government won't tolerate anyone who attempts to hijack the country's democracy and impede on the progressive steps the country has made.
Are you not victims of ongoing tensions, rivalries, primarily between the United States and China?
In this era of geopolitics, nobody is spared, so we need to be able to navigate through this. But what we are interested is to work with everybody. Everyone is the West, East and everyone, and find a solution to our problems.
Including India?
Of course, India is our neighbor, and can't forget the fact that during the last 1 year or so, India had kept us going.
We've seen recently growing tensions between New Delhi and Beijing over the docking of a Chinese research ship.
That all shows that so much of interest in Sri Lanka. Sri Lanka is strategically located. I would see it as a positive thing. We are in the global trade arena, so there is a lot of opportunity. What we need is business, and we will deal with everyone. So I said our foreign policy is friendship to all and enmity to none, and we will continue to pursue that. But we have an obligation towards our neighbors. We don't want tension in the neighborhood.
Recently, the US offered $179 million to Sri Lanka in assistance, which you could argue is quite a meager sum. In return, quite some key demands were made. How do you respond to these US demands?
I don't think that they need to tell us that. We will anyway respect the constitutional process.
But they have told you that. How do you respond to
No, they
the
can
pressures?
say the same thing, but we are anyway going to do that. We are going to IMF because that's the best way for us also. We have gone to them, and we are a founding member of that. Nothing new in going to IMF.
Sri Lanka may be compelled to buy more wheat, more energy from Russia. Are you still open to buying more food and energy from Russia? And let me put it bluntly, is the US asking you not to do so, even if it does hurt your population?
No one has asked us to do that. We understand it's fuel and the other things are not part of the sanctions. Sri Lanka has traditionally been a non-aligned member of the international community. So we work with everyone. We don't want to take sides and part of this geopolitics.
But times have changed since Sri Lanka chaired NAM, the non-aligned movement, back in 1976. Today, in 2022, are you able to withstand those pressures?
Yeah, we have successfully withstood so far and will continue to do that. That doesn't mean that we don't engage. We do engage, but we don't want to be part of somebody else's battle. We will pick and choose what is good for our country.
How much can you choose to become closer to China? Is the US in the same vein asking you to reconsider your close ties with Beijing?
Well, our relationship is based on merit. Primarily with China, we have been a long-standing friend. Our relationship dates back to early 60s 90s when we had a rice rubber pact. So we have had great relationship with them. India is our neighbor. We share a civilization. We have nothing against the West because we are a democracy.
You say you are a democracy, but objectively, the government is being criticized for its human rights record from within Sri Lanka and from the wider world. How do you respond to those criticisms?
Yeah, criticisms are always there. But if you look at Sri Lanka, that you, in your introductory remarks, what you told, a popular uprising, elected president gave away and went away halfway through the pricing. If forced or otherwise, that's people's power. People's power is because that is a democracy. And president chose not to use force. And through the democratic process, an elected president had given up and gone. Elected prime minister had given up and gone. Thrice the cabinet had rescheduled. All these things have happened in a very democratic process, totally peacefully. And it is a celebration of democracy which the world press doesn't unfortunately show us. They are only looking at the negatives.
Are you on the right track though?
We are on the right track in terms of economic recovery, in terms of constitutional recovery, in terms of restoring the supply chain. But we are not going to allow few people who don't believe in democracy to hijack. To that extent, we will prosecute them to the fullest extent of.
Who are you alluding to?
I'm referring to a group of people who have tried to take the power in 1971, 88 to 89 through undemocratic means. They pretend to be champions of democracy, but they don't believe in democracy. For them, we have tell that as a government, we will say that if you violate the law, we will not hesitate to come after you.
Now, the United States Permanent Representative to the UN Food and Agriculture Agencies in Rome, Ambassador Cindy McCain, is scheduled to visit Sri Lanka this week. Ambassador Cindy McCain will visit Sri Lanka from the 25th of September to the 28th and reinforce the UN's commitment and lasting partnership with Sri Lanka. She will meet senior government officials in Sri Lanka and aid organizations in Colombo. Ambassador Cindy McCain will also join with US Ambassador to Colombo, Julie Chung, to travel to the central province, where she will visit schools, agricultural research facilities, and community organizations and meet with recipients and implementers of relief provided through US government-funded humanitarian assistance programs. Now, President Ranil Wickremesinghe has issued a Gazette Extraordinary declaring high security zones in the Colombo district. According to the Gazette notification issued, the Ministry of Defence may make provisions for the regulation of certain activities within the high security zones based on the security situation or during special occasions, while also granting the Ministry of Defence the ability to issue commands incidentally from time to time for the proper implementation of orders. The Gazette notification goes on to say that when a command is issued to a certain person, it shall be the duty of such a person to act in compliance with the said command. Accordingly, high security zones include the Parliament Complex, Supreme Court, High Court and Magistrates Courts, Presidential Secretariat, President's House, Temple Trees, PM's Office, Sri Lanka Army, Navy, Air Force and Police Headquarters. We'll be back with more news on the other side of this short break.
අයිනෝ පුතා හැබැයි යා ගෙදර නිදියන්නෙම අමෝතු තැනක.
කාලගුණය කොහොමුණත් රයිනෝ නං වහලට සේෆ් තමයි මුළු ගෙදරම. Rhino Cement Roofing Sheets. Then you know Rhino. I know.
Big 3.
Uber Eats මගින් ඉදිරිපත් කරන ආදරයෙන් අවශ්‍යතා ඇතියට අත්‍යවශ්‍ය භාණ්ඩ පරිත්‍යාග කිරීමට වේදිකාවක්.
Welcome back. Now, the bill proposing the establishment of the National Assembly, chaired by the Speaker, was amended today in Parliament to include the Chief Opposition Whip. Prior to the amendment, the National Assembly included the Speaker of Parliament as the Chairman, the Prime Minister, the Leader of the House, the Chief Government Whip, and not more than 35 members of Parliament representing various political parties.
Meanwhile, a list of 27 MPs who will be representing various political parties in the National Assembly was presented to Parliament today by the Speaker. According to the list, MPs Johnston Fernando, Pavitra Vanniarachi, Rohita Begunawardana, Namal Rajapaksha, Ali Sabri and Sagara Karewasam will be representing the Sri Lanka Podujana Peramuna. Douglas Devananda will be representing the Elam People's Democratic Party, while Tiran Alas will be representing the United People's Party. Sisira Jayakodi of the Mahajana Eksat Peramuna, Sivanesathure Chandrakanthan of the Tamil Makkal Viduthalai Pulikkal Party, ALM Ataullah of the National Congress, Professor Tissa Vitarana of the Lanka Samasamaja Party, Vimal Veeravansa of the National Freedom Front, Vasudevana Nayakara of the Democratic Left Front, Udaya Gammampila of the Pivithuru Helorumaya, Jeevan Thondaman of the Ceylon Workers Congress, Asanka Navaratna of the Sri Lanka Mahajana Party, and Veerasumana Veerasinghe of the Sri Lanka Communist Party were also nominated. Furthermore, Rauf Hakim and Nazim Muhammad of the Sri Lanka Muslim Congress, Rishad Badiuddin of the All Ceylon Muslim Congress, P. Digambaran of the National Union of Workers, and Mano Ganesan of the Democratic People's Front were also included on the list. Vajra Abeyewardena from the United National Party, Gigi Ponnambalam from the All Ceylon Tamil Congress, Venerable Athurariya Ratana from the Ape Janabala Party, and C.V. Vigneswaran from the Tamil People's National Alliance were also nominated via the list presented to Parliament by the Speaker. Although the bill was amended to include the Leader of the Opposition and the Chief Opposition Whip, the Samaga Jana Balawegaya has not yet nominated any names. However, the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, National People's Power and the Tamil National Alliance have announced that they will not support the establishment of the National Assembly. Furthermore, MP Dallas Alap Peruma, who is now an independent member in Parliament along with his coalition, has been denied the opportunity to take part in the National Assembly. The Parliament announced that 2 more MPs can be accommodated to the Assembly, while a few MPs are yet to submit their names.
Now, a motion was passed in Parliament today for the members of the House to express their condolences over the demise of UK's Queen Elizabeth II.
Her Majesty is a staunch Christian and held to her belief as the defender of the Anglican faith. But as Queen of Ceylon, she also upheld the commitment to safeguard Buddhism under the Kandyan Convention of 1815. Her Majesty presided over the Buddha Jayanti 2500 celebrations as the head of Ceylon, together with the kings of Thailand, Laos, Cambodia and the President of Burma as Myanmar was then known. I conclude this tribute to Queen Elizabeth II of Ceylon, the last of our royal line, which began with King Vijaya. Anikka vatta sankarang, upadavaya dhammino, upaditva nirunjan, te sam pipu sukho.
Her Majesty the Queen of Elizabeth, vote of condolence in the passing away of the Queen. I move that this Parliament resolves that Parliament, Democratic Socialist Republic of Sri Lanka, pays its deepest sympathies to and conveys to His Majesty King Charles III and the royal family, the people of Great Britain, on the demise of world's immensely respected Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II.
This chamber also pays its respects to Her late Majesty Queen Elizabeth II on account of our status as a Commonwealth nation, as a nation state that is a member of the global community of nations, but also as a special acknowledgement of our shared history with the United Kingdom and its people. Whatever our political differences and history of confrontation that resulted from the periods of colonization, we come together to acknowledge the grief. We understand that the people of Great Britain are mourning, and we do respect that in all sincerity.
Now, the Cabinet gave the green light today for the establishment of a subcommittee chaired by the Minister of Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitutional Reforms in order to consider a range of proposals that could be made for the regulation of media. The Cabinet announced a host of new decisions today during its weekly media briefing. Among the decisions announced was a proposal by the Minister of Mass Media to introduce a new broadcasting law to create a media culture that is accountable to the public and to introduce a code of conduct for electronic media while protecting freedom of speech and expression and taking into account the ongoing changes in technological as well as legal fields. Taking into account the proposal made by the Minister, it was decided to appoint a Cabinet subcommittee chaired by the Minister of Justice, Prison Affairs and Constitutional Reforms to submit appropriate recommendations. Further, the Cabinet also gave the green light to import glyphosate for a period of 6 months for all agricultural activities during the 2022-2023 Maha season. The government said the decision to ban the importation of glyphosate has affected all types of agricultural activities, leading to a decrease in agricultural production and a surge in prices of essential food items. Meanwhile, the Cabinet of Ministers approved the proposal presented by the Minister of Transport and Highways to include provisions for the issuance of relevant policies, regulations and guidelines for passenger transport, three-wheelers, school vans and buses, office transport services, which are currently increasing, to the bill that is being prepared by the legal draftsman as part of efforts to revise the National Transport Commission Act No. 37 of 1991. Now the Colombo Bourse slipped to the red zone as investors resorted to profit booking while recording a turnover at 3.5-week low. However, the banking sector and treasury counters witnessed collection as investors anticipated a positive outcome on the upcoming debt restructuring meeting. Meanwhile, the main index displayed sizable volatility throughout the session as profit booking was mainly witnessed on hotels and materials sector, which led to the index to close the day at 9,965, losing 36 points. Turnover dipped to 3 billion rupees due to the slowdown in retail participation, while capital goods and food, beverage and tobacco sectors continue to dominate the market turnover with a joint contribution of 42%. Despite a drop, foreign investors remained net buyers for the 10th consecutive day. Now, stocks around the world hit 2-year lows today and bonds faced an 8th weekly loss as investors digested the prospect of a far more aggressive rise in US interest rates, while currency markets remained volatile on Japan's intervention to prop up the yen. Meanwhile, interest rates rose sharply this week in the United States, Britain, Sweden, Switzerland and Norway among other places. But it was the Federal Reserve's signal that expects high US rates to last through 2023 that set off the latest sell-off.
MSCI's World Stocks Index, which represents large and mid-cap equity performance across 23 developed markets, today fell to its worst since mid-2020, having lost about 12% in the month or so since Fed Chair Jerome Powell made clear that bringing down inflation would hurt. European stocks were a sea of red for a second day under pressures from losses in everything from bank stocks to natural resources and technology shares. The pan-regional Stoxx 600 was down by 0.5% in early trade, while Frankfurt's DAX lost 0.6%, ranking it as one of Europe's worst-performing indices. London's FTSE lost 0.1% against a backdrop of the pound tumbling to another 37-year low. S&P E-mini futures fell 0.3%, suggesting a weaker start on Wall Street later. With US rates set to rise faster and stay high for longer, the dollar hit its highest in 2 decades this week, while yields on the benchmark 10-year US Treasury soared as investors ditched inflation-sensitive assets like bonds. The 10-year yield was trading down 2 basis points on the day at 3.68%, but has risen by almost a quarter of a percentage point this week alone and is on course for the 8th consecutive weekly increase. The euro and yen fell to 20-year lows until Japanese authorities stepped into the market for the first time since 1998 to buy the yen and arrest its long slide. The yen was last steady at 142.29 per dollar, on course for its best week in more than a month, but few believe this strength will last. The euro fell after data showed that the downturn in the German economy has worsened in September.
Now, oil prices fell early today amid recession fears, and a stronger US dollar through losses were capped by supply concerns after Moscow's new mobilization campaign in its war with Ukraine and an apparent deadlock in talks on reviving the Iran nuclear deal.
Brent crude futures fell 46 cents to $90 per barrel at 6:30 a.m. GMT, while US West Texas Intermediate crude futures were also down 46 cents to $83.03 US. Front-month Brent and WTI contracts were also down 1.4% and 2.4% respectively for the week so far. However, analysts predicted that a sharp fall in the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve and drawdown in inventories may still keep oil prices supported at some point, as there is still an inevitable undersupply issue in physical markets while Iran's nuclear deal is in a stalemate. Following the US Federal Reserve's hefty 75 basis point increase on Wednesday for a third time, central banks around the world also followed suit in hiking interest rates, raising the risk of economic slowdowns. Analysts went on to predict that supply risks and tight market conditions should give oil some support above the $80 level, but a quicker tumble to a global recession will keep prices heavy.
And that's all the news we have for you this evening. Join us again tomorrow at the same time. Good night.